are getting better.
Instead of a big dark blur, I see a big light blur.
There's nothing to see. I used to live here, you know.
You're gonna die here, you know. Convenient.
Just stick close to Chewie and Lando. I'm taking care of everything.
Oh, great.
Greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to our special May the 4th be with you bonus show. Happy May the 4th be with you. It is the day to celebrate all things Star Wars. I mean, we kind of do that on this podcast all day, every day. But let's make a thing of it with the rest of the people who maybe don't. So make sure you're wearing all your great Star Wars gear to work today. Be quoting the films relentlessly, enough to annoy your coworkers, bosses, customers. Don't let them forget what day it is. And then the next day, Friday, Revenge of the Sith for the Sith. Get crazy. We got 2 days to get nuts and just let our Star Wars flags fly high. So do not question any decision you make that's Star Wars related. Just do it. All right? Go for it. Well, hopefully you are already a member of Buckethead Nation and you know what this show is all about. But if you're new here, welcome aboard. Find us on social media. We're at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And again, we are a Mando-based podcast, but it's all encompassing Star Wars action, just in case you're new here. So yeah, happy May the 4th. What a great day to be a Star Wars fan. Get out there, do your thing. But more importantly, we're here to talk specifically about Return of the Jedi, which I believe today is the last day you can see it in theaters for its 40th anniversary. Maybe they'll have some later screenings on the actual 40th anniversary on May 23rd. I'm not positive on that. But at the very least, we've had a week, and I know a lot of people that I follow on social media have gone to see the film, and I was delighted to go and see the film again. That's what we're here to talk about. I went back to the theaters to see Star Wars Return of the Jedi on the big screen for the first time, well, since the special editions originally came out back in, 97, 98? I think 97 for the special editions. And it was, again, because that's sort of the movie that we're seeing, right? Like, that's what's the version of that they're playing, is the special edition version, with some of the alterations, the enhanced special effects, all those various things. But 40 years ago, roughly, I sat in a movie theater with my family and watched Return of the Jedi, the original edit in 1983, and it was impactful, and that may not even be strong enough of a word, because I may be fuzzy on it. I do not know for certain if I had seen original Star Wars: A New Hope or Empire beforehand. I think we just ended up in the theater to see Return of the Jedi, and this might have been my first experience really seeing Star Wars. So that's what this episode is going to be about. I'm going to do some recollecting, do some recalling. We're going to talk about it. We'll talk about my experience in the theater watching the movie, and why it was kind of special, because I did something this time around. I have to confess to being somewhat of a. We'll just say I can be a smidge selfish sometimes. I think about me, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go see Return of the Jedi, and the more I thought about it, the more I sort of chewed on the idea because I did want to go see it with some friends, but my work schedule is very different from a lot of other people's, so the odds of it lining up in a fashion where I could go see it with with friends who would appreciate the movie as much as me, that was going to be more challenging. And then an idea struck my brain, and I had to follow up on it because I really, really, really enjoyed this idea, and it was simple. It was easy. At the same time, when I became aware that Return of the Jedi would be in theaters, I was also attempting to coordinate getting together to visit my mother. And incidentally enough, 40 years ago, she took me to the movies to see Return of the Jedi. So I thought for the 40th anniversary, I would flip the script and take my mom to go see Return of the Jedi, which is exactly what I did. My brother Mark was invited along, of course, but again, since I'm working more of a non-traditional schedule, he was stuck doing work things, and so we got to go see Return of the Jedi, my mother and I, and it was a lot of fun. I can't even beat around the bush about it, but we'll talk about that experience a little bit more after the break. So yeah, Return of the Jedi, 1983. That's when it first came out, May 23rd. It's been almost 40 years coming up this month. Directed by Richard Marquand, written by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas, starring all of our favorites, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. You got Harrison Ford and David Prowse and Anthony Daniels and the team, the dream team of Star Wars. I can't even imagine reading the cast list to you guys because it's like, how did we not know all these people already? I mean, it's just so burdened to our brains. I mean, Billy D as Lando, and Peter Mayhew, of course, as Chewbacca. The introduction, this is the first time we see Ian McDiarmid as Emperor Palpatine, or just the Emperor. He's not even Palpatine at this point. He's just the Emperor. If I didn't mention James Earl Jones, obviously James Earl Jones. The return, the brief cameo of Alec Guinness, of Frank Oz doing magic with Yoda. I mean, and I can't and shouldn't forget Kenny Baker, and of course, Dennis Lawson returning as Wedge, and and Jeremy Bulloch as Boba Fett, the patriarch of this podcast. You got to mention him. There's so many people that so impactful, not just on me, but on my generation. This was the last hurrah of our heroes from the Star Wars galaxy. So let's go ahead and talk about it more in depth after this. But you know what that means. It is time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Everything that has transpired has done so according to my design. Your friends up there on the Sanctuary Moon are walking into a trap, as is your rebel fleet. It was I who allowed the Alliance to know the location of the shield generator. It is quite safe from your pitiful little band. An entire legion of my best troops awaits them. Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational when your friends arrive.
So let's set the stage in the Wayback Machine just a little bit here, because we're going back in time. We're going back to 1983, June of 1983 to be specific. Now, I have attempted to put my memories into something of a story flow, right? I ran it past my mother when we went to the screening. She said that sounded right to her, but she freely admitted that she has basically zero recollection of much of it, other than us actually going. So, what I'm about to share, what I'm about to tell you, if anyone out there, most specifically my brother himself, were to refute this in any way, by all means, reach out, let me know, and I will publish a correction. But I verified as much of the facts as I could. I checked some dates on some historical documents that would help corroborate things a little bit. So I think I have a fairly decent recollection. For a person as young as I was, June of 1983, I was not yet 5 years old. And I know it's June because it's a Sunday morning. We're in Rockville, Maryland, and my father's home. He has the Sunday paper, and apparently there was I don't know if it was a discussion between my mother and my father, or if my dad was just very impromptu, like, "Hey, why don't we all go to the movies today? There's some movies out we can check out." So, two movies in particular have sort of been approved as like the family friendly. Let's pick between these two. So my father, using the Sunday paper, because back in this time of life, the Sunday paper held all the information in the world. It had the movie times, it had advertisements, and they printed up the posters as part of the advertisements for the films for the big weekends, right? Like movie theaters still want to do all their business on the weekend. So my father shows my brother and I, my brother who's not yet 3, if I have the math right on that, but real close. He's real close to that age. So my dad has the newspaper in front of us, and he wants us to point at the movie that we want to see between the two that he will show us the posters for. The first is Return of the Jedi, with that striking Drew Struzan art. It's only, it's in black and white newsprint, but it's still striking and evocative. The big image of Luke Skywalker with his laser sword and all the sort of different elements that are incorporated into that theatrical poster for Return of the Jedi. It's seared into all of our brains, and I'm just staring at it, and I remember being just like, wow, that looks like everything, and my little brother, points at it first. He points at it first, as I was sort of mesmerized by the beauty of it all. He pointed to it first. Now, some of you who know me, some of you who may know my brother, some of you know us both, you know that we have had something of a, I don't want to say adversarial, but a lot of the times in our relationship, we've chosen to be the contrarian to the other person. So when my little brother pointed at the Return of the Jedi poster first, I got sad. I remember getting sad, and sort of out of the need to be the opposite of him, I pointed at the other poster as the movie I wanted to go see. That poster, my friends, was for one of the other big summer pictures for the summer of 1983. This would be for Superman 3. And that movie poster was, Christopher Reeve holding Richard Pryor in his arms, flying away from the desert. And I think the only thing I didn't even know if I knew who Richard Pryor was at that point. I don't think the toy had been out yet. So I don't think I was familiar with Richard Pryor. I just saw a guy flying with Richard Pryor in his arms, even though I had no idea who Richard Pryor was. But again, I point at this poster to be contrarian, to be different, to not pick the same thing that my little brother did. And so my dad decides that the best way to settle this is by a coin toss. Now, this is the part of the story I don't have any actual recollection of picking heads or tails or how that was decided. I do not know. I do not recall. All I know is my dad tossed the coin. And again, my dad not above, misleading young children into kind of getting what he wants to go see. So he could have said, call it in the air, and then just said whatever he wanted to say. It could have landed on whatever one of us called. He would have said the opposite, depending on who he asked to make the call. I don't remember the exact details, but regardless, the result of the coin toss, whether he played it straight or not, was that we would go see Return of the Jedi. So my fate hinged on a coin toss, and whether or not my father was honest with us or was running deception, because he was like, I'd rather go see Return of the Jedi than Christopher Reeve carrying Richard Pryor in his arms. So that was the choice. The choice was made, and we would head down to the OG Wheaton Plaza in Wheaton, Maryland, to go see Return of the Jedi. And there are several movies where the cinematic experience is burned into my young brain. This is one of those films. Return of the Jedi was one of those movies where everything I saw was fascinating and intense and captivating. It held the attention of a young child's mind. Specifically, in particular, was two big things, and one of them I suspect you'll know exactly where I'm going as a person of my age at the time, and that was the Ewoks. The Ewoks. I mean, I was a kid. The Ewoks were amazing. They were awesome. They were super cool, and I've lived my life so long that I've gone full circle on the Ewoks. You know, when I turned into a teenager in my 20s, I was like, I don't know about those Ewoks. I'm not so sure I'm crazy about those Ewoks. Now that I'm 40 again, I'm like, you know what, Ewoks, they're pretty freaking cool. I'm all good on the Ewoks again. So such is life, right? We all go full circle on these things at some point. The other thing that really captured me, that really focused me on what I was seeing on the screen, was Jabba's palace. It was this just wonderful menagerie of creatures and alien species, and much like what happened in 77 when Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi walk into the cantina in Mos Eisley, we're introduced to the Star Wars galaxy having a drink, basically. This time around, it's again reminiscent of that scene, but it's darker. It's more dangerous. We're in the palace of this intergalactic gangster. So they're all criminal. They're all seedy characters. But for the first time since the original Star Wars, so many different species of the Star Wars galaxy are introduced. We meet. We meet Twi'leks, and we meet Gamorrean guards. We meet Klatooinians and Nikto and so many more. I mean, the Star Wars galaxy really gets filled out with species. The Rees, I think, gosh, who else is in this? There's so many of them. It's just overwhelming. Trying to name every single character that showed up in the background of a frame for 10 for 10 tenths of a second or whatever, or for 1/10 of a second, excuse me. It was just one of those things where you just were. It was sensory overload in a sense for my young brain, and I was instantly captivated by all of it, and that is one of those moments that's seared in my head. The stuff with the lightsabers and all the roar of the music and the spaceships and the space battles, that's all in there too. But the things that stand out the most was Jabba's palace and the Ewoks. That was what my young brain gravitated to the most. Like, a lot of the action stuff was just was so mind blowing, was so all encompassing that it took several years to finally get to really understand the scope of what was happening on the screen and some of the other scenes. Like the Jabba stuff is very contained. Stuff with the Ewoks, you can very focus that on for a child. The struggle for the soul of Luke Skywalker was a little beyond my grasp. I just knew I liked the red and green lightsabers. That was the fun part there. So Return of the Jedi has always been very near and dear to my heart. And again, I've the chronology of my history of watching Star Wars is maybe a little fuzzy. I don't remember specifically if we saw Jedi first, and then later on we would see A New Hope and Empire. But I know that by a couple years later, we'd seen them all, and whether it was through watching them on network television when they would play, or it would be going over to our neighbor's house who had cable and had taped movies off of HBO or whatever. That was a big introduction for us to watch Star Wars whenever we could. And obviously the toys were huge as well. And there's the cynics out there will be like, oh, Return of the Jedi was just Lucas making all these new things up so that he could sell more toys and get all these so he could develop ILM and do all these other things. It's like, I look at that now and I'm like, okay. I like the toys. I didn't have a problem with that. That was okay by me. My parents didn't have a problem buying me the toys when they could. It was not a big thing. More things for me to play with from Star Wars, that was a good thing. I was okay with that. So Return of the Jedi, a big part of everything. that Christmas, Return of the Jedi was a big part of everything because all the toys were there, and one of our favorites was the speeder bike toy. That was a great toy, and with the little button on the back that would make it explode, which I know Hasbro just did as part of like their Kenner Vintage collection, right? So they just put the speeder bike back on the market, and I have it, and it's like it's glorious. I mean, it takes me back to that Christmas in 1983 where we had that toy. It was everything. It was great. So Return of the Jedi is very, very special. And just to kind of put a bow on some of my Star Wars youth here, I don't think we got a VCR until 1987 or possibly 88. And it was shortly after that my mother signed up and joined the Columbia House Video Club, where you could order the VHSs. And this is in a time when VHS tapes, I want you to think about this. A VHS tape could cost $100. That's insane. That is just completely bananas. But there was all kinds of weird licensing things with videotapes at the time that really made the pricing on them outlandish. But somehow, some way, they nickeled and dimed, and my parents got us the Star Wars trilogy on VHS, and we wore those tapes out. I think to this day, my brother has the original VHS tapes that we have. I think those are still in his possession, and I have many other iterations of the Star Wars trilogy, several on VHS still, because hey, that's just how it is. but yeah, so like that Return of the Jedi, I think, is really sort of what fomented the love of Star Wars. Like, this was really our introduction point to being Star Wars fans. And for a long time, Return of the Jedi was still our favorite. When I got older, it became, going back and forth between Episode 4 and Episode 5, between New Hope and Empire, and then Return of the Jedi kind of became third. But when I loop back around, I'm like, that's not like a diminishing thing. It's just sort of like I understood different elements of it better. I don't want to get into like the technical processes of Richard Marquand versus George Lucas versus Irving Kershner. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff on Jedi that sort of can change your opinion on things a little bit, and we don't want to go into that because this is a celebration of the 40th anniversary. So again, the movie's back out in theaters now. You can go see it. You can relive these amazing moments for yourself. It was interesting. Again, I sort of mentioned it at the beginning. It was a little interesting. It was a little disappointing, in a sense, for me, that it is essentially the special edition, which is still being played in theaters. And there hasn't been much of or zero interest in anyone sort of digging up old prints of the original, the unaltered version of Return of the Jedi. And now, I suspect these probably do exist. There's probably film collectors somewhere that have original prints. Then maybe they play at small theaters around the country here and there. I don't know much about that scene. I don't know about that film underground that may exist out there of collectors who have the original prints of things from 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. But I do know that there are people out there who do that stuff. So there's probably prints to find. Disney probably wants them all back, though. So they probably have hired Boba Fett and Dengar to recover these. So whoever has these prints is probably laying low. I do, however, have one of the original. I have the only time the originals came out on DVD was when they what year was that? Was that 2006? That they put those out on DVD as like a secondary disc, almost as like a bonus feature. You could have the OG version of the original trilogy on each of the films. So I have that, and that's wonderful and that's nice because, again, there's a lot of things in the special editions that's fun, that's nice. The bumping up of the graphics, the effects, all of that, making it look sharper and nicer and representing that picture and upping the sound quality is glorious. But I don't need the Jedi Rocks bit in Jedi. I like the original love nub ending of Return of the Jedi with the Ewok celebration. So the changes that they made, I get it. And I get. I've come around on why they included Hayden Christensen's Force Ghost and replaced Sebastian Shaw's Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker. I get all these things. I understand all of them. But yeah, I'm very nostalgic for that OG print, and I will throw that on the DVD player every now and then just to kind of watch it the old way, the way that I remember seeing it on sort of a grainy VHS player back in the day. Yeah, it's so fun to watch Star Wars. And again, I'm sitting there in the theaters, and Return of the Jedi is a film I think we've all watched, if not dozens of times, possibly hundreds of times at this point in our lives. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and I'm just so immersed. Initially, okay, hold on. Let me go back a little bit. Let me pause this for a second before I kind of go down this rabbit hole. I do have to say, when the 20th Century Fox fanfare began, and John Williams' Star Wars overture hit the screen, and the words, hit the screen, and the pullback of Star Wars, and the rising of the scroll. I got a tad emotional. I got really like, oh my gosh, I'm watching Star Wars again in a movie theater. And I know I've said it before on the podcast that Star Wars does belong in the cinemas, but it wasn't until this screening that I was like really, really reminded of just how special it is to see Star Wars on the big screen. It's been since 2019 that we had Star Wars in theaters. Though I did hear there were some limited screenings of The Mandalorian season finale in theaters. But again, it's not quite the same. It's not that, it doesn't have that gravitas of seeing just the big Star Wars font up across the screen, the giant logo, and John Williams music blasting in amazing sound quality. Was it Dolby Digital sound quality? Just blowing your eardrums out and rocking you into the back of your seat in the theater. It's incredible to have that experience for Star Wars in the movie theaters. So if by chance you hear this on Thursday, May the 4th, and you still have time to go to the theater to see Return of the Jedi before it's out, stop what you're doing and go. Just go and just soak it all in, because it's going to be a few more years before Star Wars is back in the theaters. And listen, we don't know what's going to happen with those new films. We don't know. But I know what happens in Return of the Jedi, and I was here for all of it. I loved seeing it, hearing it. Again, the opening shots, the Star Destroyers rolling overhead, that low rumble of their engines, vibrating the walls of the theater. It was very impactful, and it took me back in time. It really, really did. Now, did it take me all the way back to 83? I don't know, because, again, the certain moments are seared in my brain are very different than what I appreciate about the film now. I have very little recollection in 83 of my impression of the Emperor, other than he was kind of scary. I watch it now, and I'm just delighted by Ian McDiarmid's performance. It's wicked, it's sinister, it's captivating, it's kind of fun, and it has his cackling abilities are off the charts. He has like that one like contact lens that's like slightly off-centered, which is still kind of weirds me out a little bit. And there's still things there's still things in this, even the special edition, they didn't go back and fix. You'll still see the shot of Boba Fett's guidance antenna on the wrong side of his helmet. They somehow flipped that film, and no one's gone back to change that. It was sort of interesting to look at certain things in this and wonder why they haven't tweaked it. And I don't know if there was something in the contract that Lucas put in there. It's like, hey, these are done now. You guys can't mess with them anymore, even though they kind of still do. We all know about the McClunky incident when they first went on to Disney Plus for A New Hope. So I don't know why they haven't made little small tweaks here and there on things. Part of me sort of surprised that when I queue up Return of the Jedi on Disney Plus and we go to the Emperor's arrival on the second Death Star, that we don't see like Death Troopers inserted into the parade formation of Imperials. There's like little elements like that I'm sort of wondering, like, why, just how long until Disney decides to start messing with these, or do they have to wait for is there some sort of lifespan on George Lucas's contract? Does he have to pass away first before they can start altering things? But I tried to stop that train of thought. I didn't want to go there. I had to stop and pull myself back. I was like, just enjoy the movie. Stop thinking about the other elements of things. And it again, Jedi's a movie that that I have so much fun with, and it's fun to watch Luke and his struggles to take on the Emperor, to take on his father, Darth Vader. But I was really reminded how much I enjoyed Luke's transformation from Empire to when we catch up with him in Jedi. There's a lot of ground to fill in there to when he becomes this very, much more confident character in Return of the Jedi. And, if you're reading the Star Wars comics, you know that Charles Soule is doing a really, really nice job of sort of dealing with Luke in the aftermath of his failures on Bespin, the loss of his hand, the loss of, the finding out the truth about Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, and sort of, again, him growing into the character that we will meet in Return of the Jedi. Charles Soule is doing a fantastic job kind of developing that stretch of time to shape Luke in such an interesting, fundamentally enjoyable way. But again, just sort of speaking to the films alone, that transition is wonderful, and Mark Hamill is wonderful in it, and getting to see him with that confidence. And again, it's another little slide, makes you sort of wonder, like, oh man, why couldn't we have this Luke in the sequel trilogy? But that is a digression for another day, so we'll hold off on that. Another big impression from watching Return of the Jedi this time around too was sort of I was sort of reminded how much, or maybe how much isn't the right way to phrase it, but just how unique and how seared into my brain. For the longest time, my idea of the Death Star was always the second Death Star, like the half completed, with like the scaffolding broken off and looking into space, just rough around the edges, not the classic spherical Death Star from A New Hope. And I don't know I don't know. Again, I think that's more of the evidence that Jedi was my first experience with Star Wars, because for so long I always thought it was weird to see the Death Star as just the giant completed spherical ball. To me, the Death Star was like that giant, massive, half completed thing over the moon of Endor. And I was sort of reminded of that watching the film on the big screen this time. But it's just pure magic to watch Star Wars in cinemas, specifically for me, the original trilogy. I bet there's a younger generation who feels the same way if they get a chance to go and watch, Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith. If they get a chance to revisit those in the big screen at some point down the road, I think they'll have a similar experience that I did. And that's wonderful. And everyone's Star Wars experience is so unique and different and wonderful, but it all brings us together, right? Like, all of us have a Star Wars story that is similar yet vastly different, and it's what connects us all. Like the Force itself, it binds us together. And for me, Jedi is a massive, massive part of it. So it celebrated its 40th anniversary this month. Is really, really special. I think the film has aged incredibly well. Like I said, when I was more of a young jerk, I might have had some attitude issues with Jedi. I might have gotten silly about the Ewoks and all the puppetry and stuff like that. Now I'm all about it. I embrace it all. Like, this is what got me into Star Wars. And so I treat it very, very dearly. I consider it very near and dear to my heart. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's this wonderfully cinematic experience that I can't recommend enough. Especially if you're in my age bracket, you know already. Younger audiences, I think seeing Jedi on the big screen is a lot of fun, and it's just a great picture. I mean, it's, again, if you want to be the curmudgeon, you can say, like, oh, well, Lucas opted for the happy endings, instead of what he had really originally conceived. Blah, 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 money for the toys, blah, blah, blah. You can be real cynical about these things. And we've read the information over the years. We've seen the interviews with, like, Gary Kurtz and other people who were involved in sort of like the earlier drafts of Star Wars and how it was originally going to end and all these different things. And, they all sound great and interesting and fascinating, but this is the Star Wars that we got. And it means a lot to me. And that's kind of where I want to leave things, because again, watching this movie in the big screen reminded me of just how special it was, how great it is, enjoyable, fun. Again, it puts an end. It gives all the characters just I think, is a really nice, fun, happy send-off. And, maybe the fan of high drama that I have become can see like, oh, well, maybe if X, Y, and Z had made like this heroic sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. That's not what Star Wars became. Maybe Lucas had different ideas originally for how that was going to go. He ultimately saw Star Wars for what it was, and that was for, and I don't say it in a derogatory fashion, but, wholesome family entertainment. They're fairy tales that he created, and that's magic. That's simply magic, because it transcends time. In a lot of senses, it transcends cinema. Like, you and I could sit here and tell the story of Star Wars without having to have a single thing on the screen, and people would be fascinated by what we're telling them. Much like C-3PO does to the Ewoks, tells them the story of Luke and Han and Leia's adventures, and it wins over the Ewoks. That is what Star Wars is. That, again, you and I sit around with a bunch of people who've never heard of Star Wars, don't know anything about it. They haven't had TVs for 50 years. They don't know anything. You tell them that story. You tell me they're not going to be fascinated by what you're telling them? Get out of here. That's magic. That's storytelling magic. And that's why Star Wars is so special to me. And I think that's where I'm going to leave things, because I don't know. I don't want to keep going down that rabbit hole. I could talk about this all day. I could. But I'm not gonna. So thank you so much for being here for my reminiscing on Return of the Jedi. Again, if you get a chance to listen to see it in theaters, I hope you took the opportunity. If you haven't done it yet, hurry up. What are you waiting for? I don't think it's out for much longer. So go and do it. It is magic. Okay, my name is Tom. Nargai Tom. And thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We are the Mandovision Podcast. The best way to find us is, of course, on social media, at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right. Just a quick programming note. We will pause. I shouldn't even say pause because we haven't started. We're going to push back our Star Wars The Clone Wars rewatches by another week because of the new content that's dropping on Disney Plus tomorrow or today for May the 4th. We're going to do another bonus episode where we talk about Visions Volume 2. So that will be next. That will be the next podcast you get from me. And then after that, I think we're going to be in a good spot, and we will kick off Star Wars The Clone Wars rewatches with minimal interruptions to the programming schedule. It sort of, with May the 4th landing on a Thursday, it was going to make it very difficult to get a couple shows out this week. So we'll record on Star Wars Visions Volume 2 and drop that next week for you all. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So, again, thanks for checking out the podcast. Thanks for being here. We'll be back next week. Just continue to be great Star Wars fans. This is our day right now. May the 4th be with you, and Revenge of the 5th on Friday. Star Wars it up, my friends. Let's get out there. And this is 2 days where you can just keep your bucket strapped on for 2 days in a row. Maybe keep some mints in there. You don't want to have anything too garlicky before you put the bucket on. But remember, just keep that in mind for your own benefits, All right, my friends. Remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 47.
It's a trap!